The alien military base lay under the pale light of two moons, its walls stretching like dark, jagged teeth against the night sky. Inside the training yard, rows of recruits stood in strict formation. The air was tense, filled with the smell of metal, sweat, and the low hum of energy shields along the perimeter. Commander Virok, a tall, battle-scarred officer with deep green skin and a voice like a grinding engine, paced slowly in front of them. He was a legend in the sector, not for kindness, but for one unshakable rule. No one, no matter their species or rank, would get special treatment here. That morning, he had repeated the same words he always did when new batches of recruits arrived. You will all be treated equally. No excuses, no exceptions, no mercy. His voice echoed through the yard, each word like a stone thrown into still water. Then the last recruit stepped forward. She was human. Her name tag read, Kara. She was not tall, not heavily built, and her uniform looked like it had been altered to fit her frame. Her brown hair was tied back neatly, and her eyes, a deep shade of gray, scanned the yard as if measuring it. Virok's gaze slid past her without much interest, until he noticed something unusual. Behind her assigned workstation in the barracks, pinned to the wall, were a series of small paper notes. They were not printed on standard military sheets. Instead, they were written by hand in a sharp, jagged script, some of the ink smudged as if it had been written in haste. The other recruits had already noticed them. They whispered in low tones, tails swaying, antennae twitching, eyes narrowing. No one recognized the language. Some notes were marked with symbols that looked like coordinates. Others contained only a few words followed by strange red markings. During inspection, Virok walked to her station, boots clicking against the metal floor. He hopped in front of the wall and studied the notes. "Recruit," he said, his voice slow and cold. "Remove these." Kara didn't look away from the small tools she was arranging on her desk. "I can't," she said quietly. "You will," Virok replied, stepping closer. Finally, she met his eyes. "If I take them down, people will die." She said it without hesitation, without fear. A murmur rippled through the recruits. Some laughed nervously, others stepped back as if her words were dangerous to hear. Virok's jaw tightened. "You think you're special because you're human? My rule." "I don't think I'm special," she interrupted softly. "I think you're not ready for what's coming." The silence that followed was heavy. Virok leaned in, scanning one of the notes. The script was sharp and looping, nothing he recognized. He tapped the comm on his wrist. "Security, scan these for translation." A spherical drone zipped into the room, hovering by the notes. Its thin light beam swept over them. A few seconds later, the drone beeped and a message flashed on Virok's wrist screen. Translation blocked. Classified threat level. High Council clearance required. Virok frowned. Classified? That meant these notes weren't just random human scribbles. They were registered in the Empire's own system as dangerous. He turned to Kara. "Where did you get these?" "I wrote them," she replied simply. Before he could ask more, the base alarm blared twice, the signal for incoming inspection from higher command. All recruits snapped into line, but Virok's attention stayed on the human. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm, as if she had known this moment would happen. Later, in the mess hall, Kara sat alone, eating quietly. A tall reptilian recruit dropped his tray across from her and leaned forward. "What's your game, human?" he hissed. "Trying to scare everyone with your little notes?" Kara looked at him for a long moment before answering. "If you're here tomorrow, you'll understand." She took another bite of food as if the conversation was already over. The reptilian recruit sneered, but before he could say more, Commander Virok entered the hall. His eyes flicked from Kara to the rest of the room, scanning for weakness. He gave no sign of it, but his mind was already turning. The base had seen its share of strange recruits, but never one who pinned mysterious, classified warnings on her wall, and never one who seemed so certain about danger no one else could see. That night, long after lights out, Virok walked quietly into the barracks. He approached her workstation again, the dim glow of the night lamps casting shadows over the notes. His eyes caught one in particular, It read, in the strange script, "First strike, dawn." Vurak glanced at the clock on the wall. Dawn was less than 6 hours away. The sirens shattered the pre-dawn quiet, their sharp wail echoing through the steel corridors of the alien base. Recruits stumbled from their bunks, still half asleep, scrambling to dress in training gear. Commander Vurak's voice thundered through the intercom, "Yard, now!" The recruits formed up in the cold gray light of the training ground. The air carried the scent of dust and ozone, and the faint tremor of distant machinery hummed under their boots. The obstacle course loomed ahead like a steel monster. Towers, walls, spinning blades, mud pits, and the infamous gauntlet, a series of moving platforms suspended over a deep pit of water. "Today," Vurak barked, "you prove you deserve to be here. Fail, and you're gone." His eyes swept over the recruits before locking briefly on Kara. When her turn came, Kara stepped forward without a word. She adjusted the straps of her harness, glanced at the layout, and started running. Her movements were precise, almost too precise. She wasn't racing like the others. She was measuring, calculating. The first alien recruit had barely cleared the second obstacle when Kara was already halfway through. She ducked under swinging chains, balanced across narrow beams, and vaulted walls in complete silence. As she approached the gauntlet, a sudden gust of wind from the base's ventilation tower sent one of the platforms swaying violently. A recruit ahead of her lost his footing and fell into the water below with a splash. Gasps rose from the watching crowd. Kara didn't hesitate. She closed her eyes. For 3 seconds, she stood perfectly still, as if counting. Then she moved, stepping onto the first platform just as it swung toward her, leaping to the next without looking down. Each jump landed in rhythm with the platform's swing, as if she knew the timing before it happened. Commander Vurak's eyes narrowed. He had seen skill, but this was something else. She reached the final platform, leapt to the ground, and without missing a beat, walked back toward her station. No triumphant grin, no glance at the others, just calm, steady breathing. A reptilian recruit approached her after the drill, his scales still wet from the water pit. "You're lucky," he muttered. "That was all timing." Kara tilted her head. "Luck runs out," she said softly. "Memory doesn't." Before he could ask what she meant, a sudden commotion drew their attention. One of the recruits had found something. A note, wedged between 2 metal panels on the gauntlet's support beam. It was the same sharp, jagged script as the ones above Kara's station. Vurak strode over, took the note, and scanned it with his wrist device. Again, the same warning flashed, translation blocked, classified threat level. This time, however, the note contained a crude map. At the bottom, in bold red ink, were 3 alien numerals, 040 quas. The base clock read 0345. The training yard's lights flickered once, then steadied, bathing the recruits in a harsh white glow. The cold morning air pressed heavy on their skin as every head turned toward the base clock. 0346, 14 minutes until whatever the note predicted. Commander Vurak's jaw was tight as he held the slip of paper. Its ink seemed to almost shimmer under the artificial light. Kara stood off to the side, her hands clasped loosely behind her back, eyes fixed not on Vurak, but on the northern wall of the base. "Recruit Kara," Vurak said, his voice low but carrying. "What does this mean?" She didn't answer. "You will speak, or you won't believe me," she interrupted, calm as still water. The other recruits shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered in alien tongues, throwing her suspicious glances. Vurak motioned for the security officer to bring a scanner. The sleek device hummed to life, its blue light washing over the paper. The result flashed instantly on the officer's visor. Translation blocked, High Council only. Threat class Omega. Vurak felt his skin prickle. Omega wasn't a word thrown around lightly. It was reserved for galaxy-shaking events, invasions, mass extinctions, irreversible planetary collapse. At 0349, a faint tremor ran through the ground, barely noticeable, but Kara's head turned sharply toward the source. Vurak caught the movement. "You knew." Her eyes met his. "You have 7 minutes to get everyone inside." The commander's instincts screamed to demand more answers, but the distant hum in the air was growing louder, like something slicing through atmosphere far above them. All recruits back to barracks. Now, Vurak barked. They obeyed instantly, all except Kara, who stayed rooted to her spot. That includes you, human, Vurak snapped. She shook her head. If I leave this position, you'll lose half your wall before the first shot lands. Vurak froze. And then it happened. At 03:54, the skies lit up, not with the golden flare of sunrise, but with streaks of molten light cutting through the clouds. They weren't natural meteors. Their descent was too controlled, too deliberate. Vurak's communicator flared with panicked voices. Unidentified craft breaching perimeter. Shields at 70%. No, 65. Kara's voice cut through the chaos, steady and cold. Look at the far ridge. Vurak turned. Barely visible in the shadows, thin metallic shapes were unfolding along the horizon. Siege engines, their barrels already glowing with a charge. At 03:56, a blast slammed into the north wall. The impact threw dirt and metal high into the air. Alarms screamed, recruits scrambled for cover. But Kara didn't move. She was already pulling something from her locker, a slim black device wrapped in worn cloth. Vurak stared. Where did you get? Later, she said sharply. If you want to live. The commander found himself against all logic, obeying her. And as the second blast shook the ground, Kara slipped one more folded note into his hand. 3 words written in the same jagged script. This is small. The ground shook like a living thing trying to throw them off its back. Dust rained from the rafters as the second blast ripped through the north wall, the shockwave knocking recruits to the floor. Klaxons wailed over the base loudspeakers, a metallic voice barking orders in 3 different alien dialects. Through the smoke, Commander Vurak saw figures scrambling, some grabbing rifles, others rushing to reinforce the breach. But Kara didn't flinch. She moved with frightening purpose, weaving between panicked soldiers until she reached the open yard. The air was thick with the acrid bite of burnt metal. Chunks of debris hissed as they cooled in the dirt. And beyond the gap in the wall, Adawi shapes advanced, insectoid warriors in dark armor, their segmented limbs clattering as they crawled over the rubble like an invading tide. Fall back to defensive line, Vurak roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. But Kara was already on the broken wall, kneeling in plain sight. She set down the slim black device she'd pulled from her locker and tapped its surface. It unfolded into a strange rifle-like tool, humming with low, dangerous energy. It wasn't standard issue. Vurak sprinted to her side, grabbing her shoulder. You'll be killed. No, she said quietly, eyes locked on the advancing enemy. They will. Before he could stop her, she aimed at the ridge far beyond the insectoid soldiers. Vurak followed her line of sight and saw it. A single towering siege engine half hidden in the fog, its cannon glowing brighter as it prepared a third strike. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The device emitted no loud blast, no visible projectile, just a faint pulse in the air, like the ripple from a pebble dropped into water. 3 seconds later, the siege engine erupted in a plume of molten shards. The enemy faltered, their advance slowing. Some chittered in alarm, retreating a few steps. How? Vurak began, but his comms cut in with the panicked voice of the control tower officer. Commander, how did you know the ridge gun was there? Our sensors never picked it up. Kara stood, collapsing her weapon into a compact form and sliding it back under her arm. It was in the notes, she said simply. You just never read far enough. Another explosion boomed in the distance, closer this time. The enemy was regrouping. Vurak finally gave the order he'd never imagined giving. Follow the human's lead. As they fell in behind her, Kara slipped a fresh note into his hand. 6 alien words, their meaning somehow clear even without translation. Second wave comes from inside. Vurak's eyes darted to the barracks, and that was when the screaming began. The screaming from the barracks was sharp and sudden, cutting through the chaos outside like a blade. Commander Vurak spun toward the sound, his instincts warring between holding the outer wall and protecting the recruits inside. Kara was already moving, weaving through the rubble and smoke toward the inner corridor. They burst through the sliding doors just as they sealed shut behind them, the base's lockdown protocols kicking in. The hallway smelled faintly of scorched plastic and ozone, and the floor was scattered with the personal gear of recruits who had fled in panic. Ahead, shadows shifted. Vurak raised his sidearm, but Kara's hand shot out, pressing his weapon down. "Don't fire yet," she whispered. He gave her a sharp look. "They're inside." "I know," she said. "And if you shoot now, you'll hit the wrong target." They rounded the corner and found two recruits, one alien, one human exchange cadet, standing frozen, hands raised. Between them lay a smoldering crate, its lid blown open to reveal a cluster of small, spider-like drones. Their legs twitched as they tried to reassemble after the blast. "Saboteurs planted them here," the alien cadet said quickly. "They were crawling through the vents, His words died when Kara knelt beside the wreckage and picked up one of the damaged drones. She turned it over in her hands, tracing a symbol etched into its underside. A symbol Vurak recognized instantly, the insignia of the base's own supply division. Someone on the inside had armed the enemy. Vurak's gut clenched. "This isn't possible." "It's already happening," Kara cut in, standing. "The second wave was never just outside the wall. It's here. Right now. And they know exactly where to hit." As if on cue, the lights flickered, then plunged the corridor into red emergency glow. The distant rumble of the outer wall battle was replaced by a closer, heavier sound. Bulkhead doors slamming shut, one aft, or another sealing sections of the base. Vurak's comms crackled with a frantic voice from the command center. "Commander, someone is overriding our defense grid. Sections 5 through 8 are offline." Kara moved fast, slipping another folded note into his palm without looking at him. He glanced at it and felt his blood run cold. In the jagged alien script were 4 words: "Your second in command." Vurak's mind reeled. His second in command, Lieutenant Raykor, had served beside him for years. They'd fought in wars together. They'd buried soldiers side by side. "This is a trick," he growled, shoving the note back at her. "Believe me or not," Kara said, her voice low but steady. "But if you wait to check, you'll be dead before you decide." In the silence that followed, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Raykor appeared, flanked by 2 armored soldiers, carrying an access keycard that gleamed under the red light. His eyes locked on Vurak. And in that moment, Vurak realized Kara might not be wrong. Shuffle of allies under attack, but the confident stride of predators walking into their own territory. Commander Vurak's hand hovered near his sidearm. "Lieutenant," he called, voice tight. "Report." Raykor's expression didn't change. "Sections 5 through 8 are compromised," he said evenly. "I'm securing the command center." His gaze flicked briefly to Kara. "And removing unnecessary variables." Kara didn't move, but her grip on her strange folded weapon tightened. "You're late," she said softly. Raykor's jaw twitched. "Late? I had you pegged from the second day," she continued, stepping into the middle of the corridor. "Your boots, polished every morning, even during double drills. Your locker, always locked, even when the rest of the recruits were ordered to leave them open. And that little habit of checking the vents, like you knew something was in them." The 2 soldiers flanking Raykor shifted uneasily. "You're not he, or to secure the command center," Kara said. "You're here to hand it over." Vurak's stomach turned. "Raykor, tell me she's wrong." But Raykor didn't answer. Instead, he drew the access keycard from his pocket and held it up. The embedded chip glowed faintly, not the blue of the Empire's security network, but the deep crimson of an enemy system. "The Empire is finished, Commander," Raykor said, his voice strangely calm. "And when it falls, I will be on the winning side." A blast from outside shook the walls, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Kira's eyes narrowed. "The winning side has a name," she said. "Say it." Raykor smirked. "Why, you already know it, human." The air between them grew taut. Finally, she spoke it aloud, each syllable sharp as glass. "The Korthan Hive." Vurak stiffened. The Korthan hive wasn't just an enemy, it was a nightmare, a war machine that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but husks behind. Their attacks were always swift, always overwhelming, and they never spared survivors. "You've been feeding them our coordinates," Varrock said, rage boiling under his voice. Rakor didn't deny it. "They would have found us eventually. This way, I live, and maybe a few others." "They don't keep prisoners," Kara said coldly. "They keep food." Before Rakor could reply, the distant sound of gunfire in the outer yard grew louder, coming closer. "You've just opened the gate for them," Kara said, raising her weapon. "And now you've given me no choice." Rakor's soldiers moved first, rifles snapping up. Varrock drew his sidearm in the same instant. The corridor erupted in flashes of red light and the hiss of alien plasma, and over it all, Kara's voice cut through. "Commander, if I don't make it, read the last note on my wall." The corridor was a storm of light and sound, plasma bolts slicing the air, the walls hissing as molten metal burned through their surface. Varrock dropped behind an overturned storage crate, returning fire in short, controlled bursts. Kara didn't take cover. She moved through the chaos like she had been here before, each step timed to the rhythm of the enemy's fire, each shot from her strange weapon cutting through armor as if it were cloth. Rakor's soldiers went down first, their bodies collapsing in smoking heaps. But Rakor himself was fast, too fast. He darted toward the side door leading deeper into the base, firing over his shoulder to keep them pinned. "Don't let him reach the control center," Kara shouted. Varrock lunged forward, but a section of the ceiling gave way from an earlier blast, forcing him to roll clear. Debris crashed between them. Rakor was almost through the door when Kara broke into a sprint. She didn't fire. Instead, she closed the distance and slammed into him, driving both of them through the doorway. The two struggled, shadows shifting in the dim emergency light. Varrock heard the grunt of effort, the clang of metal hitting the floor, then a single, deafening shot. Silence. Varrock pushed the debris aside and stepped through, weapon raised. Rakor lay crumpled on the ground, the access keycard still clutched in his lifeless hand. Kara stood over him, breathing hard, her weapon humming with fading energy, but before Varrock could speak, the base-wide alarm changed pitch, a long, unbroken tone. "Breach. Core sector compromised." Kara's eyes flicked to him. "They're not here for the recruits, Commander. They're here for the reactor. If they overload it, they take the whole planet with them." She shoved the keycard into his hand. "You know the way. Seal the core. Now." "What about you?" "I'll slow them down." He started to argue, but she was already moving toward the sounds of approaching Korthan troops. A growing, chittering tide in the next corridor. "Kara," he called. She didn't turn. "Read the last note," she said, her voice echoing against the steel walls. "And don't waste time, look, ing for me." Then she vanished into the red-lit smoke. Varrock ran. His boots pounded the grated floor, the keycard heavy in his grip. By the time he reached the core chamber, the breach doors were sealing. He slammed the card into the panel, locking the system down just as the first shockwave rattled the structure. Hours later, after the hive's forces had been driven back and the fires were finally under control, Varrock returned to the barracks. Kara's station was empty, her weapon gone, her locker open. Only the notes remained fluttering in the draft from the broken wall. He found the last one pinned dead center. It was in the same jagged script as the others, but this time there was a translation scratched beneath it in Basic. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it. Keep fighting. The hive fears humans for a reason." Varrock stood there for a long moment, the note in his hand. Then, without a word, he pinned it back on the wall and began writing one of his own. The war wasn't over, but now the humans weren't just recruits, they were a warning.